Parenting presents numerous challenges, including the array of decisions involved in educating our children and our teens. Dr. Dominic Padurano, whom I call a teacher's teacher, has extensive experience tutoring students across various subjects and skills, passionate about supporting their aspirations. In today's conversation, we explore current trends in adolescent education and offer tips to help prepare the next generation to successfully launch into adulthood. This podcast is brought to you by DJ Works Media with resources and ideas for you at mid-career or halftime of life. Check out our online courses where we want you to not only start, but finish. Books available in all versions, and songs available for immediate download with sheet music and instrumental accompaniment tracks. Our musicals are family-friendly with great music that's memorable and inspiring. Sign up at goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter for weekly updates. Now to our episode. Well, I am excited to have Dr. Dominic Padurano with us this morning. Well, it's morning here as we are recording it, and you are on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast, but you have a huge background in education, and that's near and dear to my heart because I've been in education for a very long time, starting to teach young, but I've gone into a lot of other areas, of course, but education is very, very important in all that we do, actually, as entrepreneurs. So, hello, first of all, I'm so glad to introduce you. And I usually like our guests to introduce themselves a little bit more than me introducing them, because I'd love you to share a little bit of your background and how you've come to the place that you are at now. And really, what has made you a great teacher? Because as we all know, education alone does not make a great teacher. We all had those teachers who've had a number of degrees and we can't stay awake in their class. So why don't you give us a little bit of your background?
Sure. So it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. And, although I do teach now, I feel like I've always been a teacher. I just was telling my mom the story of when I was 6 years old, I finished all of these SRA cards, which were self-directed reading cards, really, really fast and in first grade. And I didn't have anything left to do. And this little girl named Dawn was chatting and she didn't know how to read. So the teacher said, well, why don't you teach her how to read? And so my first tutoring job was like in first grade. And I think part of what makes me a good teacher is that I do love to learn everything. And I'm really passionate about it. And I think my students can pick up on that passion. And then that helps to get them interested in it. And the other thing, I think, because I've had so many different experiences outside of education, I can relate maybe difficult concepts to certain students to something that they can relate to. For example, I was trying to teach a student why doing test prep right before a test is really important and not doing test prep in August and then waiting until December to take the test. And I likened it to volleyball preparation because she's a big volleyball player. So I think those two things really help me relate a lot to students and also just hopefully get students excited about learning themselves.
There is that's such an important point. Because I've taught music for years. And one of the best things that I could do for those entering that field is because there are very few that are going to have this amazing talent. Sure. Even though some of these moms say, oh, I know my daughter, my son is just the next, a wonderful star. No, I'm sorry. But if you can develop a love for learning and a love for the instrument, love for the subject, you have given somebody a lifetime of it's a gift of learning. And I think that's probably the best thing that you can do. And I heard that in what you were saying in developing that love. So I am all in on that. I think that's just really, really wonderful, because then you're equipping people to learn for themselves and not
Exactly.
always be dependent on someone. Although we should never shy away from getting help for what we need, of course, but it will also equip people to do that. So now you are a business owner as well, a small business owner.
Right.
And you started your business really, as what I say, at the halftime of life, at like age 42. That's a perfect stage. A lot of people are at mid-career, halftime of life, and this is really what we focus on in this podcast, men and women. And people that are saying, okay, I think I'm ready for something else. I'm ready for a change. I mean, there may be people that have been in the classroom for years. So or they've been in the medical field for years, something. So how did that work for you, and how did you decide, and what did you decide? How did you set that up?
Well, I really say it's funny. I just celebrated the 10th anniversary of my business on May 6th, 2024. And I posted on social media that day that I turned a batch of lemons into the best batch of lemonade ever. I actually was in the highest paying school in New York State, and it was a very high powered district. And unfortunately, perhaps because I went to Harvard, perhaps because I have a PhD, my chair was very intimidated by me, and we had very different teaching philosophies. I kind of like to follow the guide on the side type of teaching philosophy, where he was very much the sage on the stage type of teaching philosophy, and he didn't understand often what I was trying to do. And so, long story short, after 2 years, I wasn't invited back for my third tenure year. And I thought that, for somebody like me who's such an overachiever, who'd never been let go from a job before, I thought this was the end of the world. But I had always been a tutor, just to make extra money on the side. Ever since I was, 6 years old, I'd been tutoring. And I thought, I think I might be able to turn this into a full-time business. And I was lucky because I'm a good saver, and I had saved all of the sort of extra money from the 2 years in that job above my living expenses. And between that and unemployment insurance, I, lived off that for the first year. And that was what helped get Crimson Coaching off the ground. And luckily, it just kind of ballooned from there. I started teaching from the previous students from the previous high school I had been at in history, which is what my PhD is in. But then that ballooned into, oh, can you teach us Spanish? I'm certified in Spanish. Can you do SAT? I can do SAT. And so from there, I would say now about 40% of my business is SAT and ACT tutoring. Another 40% is college essay coaching. And then another 20% is sort of a mixed bag of various things. So I'm definitely probably what would be called a generalist, but I really like it that way because as a social studies teacher for 10 years, I really needed to be just one thing every day. And as a small business owner, I love the diversity of tasks that I get to do every day.
What I'm really hearing through this too is how well you were equipped, and you did not quit learning, and you were able to, because you went ahead and, I've been pretty jaded because of my background, I think, but degrees alone don't always mean anything to me, and awards alone don't always mean a lot to me. A lot of people can. People can jimmy the system. They can do anything. It happens all the time. But from what I'm hearing is you were so well equipped, not only in your field, but also Spanish, SAT, college prep, essay writing. You've a number of things. A lot of people just do one little thing, but you were able to now look at a plate of areas that you could help others. And that's a great asset to have. And it helps in establishing a business, because you're not just stuck in, they always say, oh, so pick your lane, just your one little. You're not just staying just in that one little area on this particular topic, but you're able to expand a little bit. And then you find out where the work is. You find out what's the need, which is really important. And I'm going to talk here about I want to ask you here how you first got your clients, because I think part of that is how do you connect with teens? Because you've got a lot of those adolescents and those teens now going into the future. So what makes them say, okay, I want to work with you, and can you help me? And how do they respond to you as well?
Well, I'll be completely honest and say usually it's mom or dad, and I would say 90% of the time mom, who says, you're going to work with Dr. P. So my first job is connecting with the parents. And I think the way that I connect with parents is, I think parents want to know two things when they hire a tutor. The first is, does the tutor know their stuff, their subject matter?
Right.
And the second thing is, will my child be safe emotionally in that tutor's presence, right?
Yes.
And so I think you have to strike this balance between what one parent called, for me, as sort of structured nurturing, and that, I will get your child down the field toward the goalpost, but I'm going to do it in a nurturing way. Right. And then I think the students respond to my honesty, and also nurturing. So, for example, if a student shows up without their homework done the first time, I'll probably just say, okay, it happens to everybody. Try to do a better job next time. But if it happens a second or third time, that's when I'm going to say, hey, you really need to start doing your homework, because you're not going to reach the goal that you and I set for you at the outset of tutoring if you don't put the work in on your own. So I think that, like I said, that combination of honesty, knowing my stuff, and yet being nurturing and understanding when, life happens. And especially now, there's a lot of teenage mental health issues. And so being sensitive to that, I think, is really important.
And you mentioned something too, that you mentioned goals.
Mm-hmm.
So probably part of that is going to be a parent saying, this kid needs to he needs to get a better score here to get into this college, or to, whatever. But how do you relate to a teen now that has this is going to be important for parents, not only parents, but grandparents, because a lot of grandparents now are starting to be more involved with those, people have to work. They've got to keep their jobs. And so part of that responsibility and encouragement ends up being in that grandparent court too. But how do you communicate to that student how important goals are? And how are you able to set those goals? Is it basically from the parent, or do you let the student be a part of that process as well?
Definitely the student needs to take ownership. And I think, it's a fine line between, sometimes I think students set their goals too low. Like one time I had a student who, this was about 8 years ago, she had a 1430 on her SAT, and I thought she could really apply to some more selective schools than she was shooting for. And I tried to encourage her to do so. And yet other times, a student, might have a 1290 on their SAT and they're applying to Harvard. And it's sort of like, you're really not going to get in there. So it's, trying to inject a dose of realism, but also do it really gingerly often. And sometimes it's not just the students' goals who need to be reappraised. Sometimes it's the parents' goals. So, one time I had a student get a 1580 on their SAT, which is near perfect. and the mom wanted him to try to get a 1600 to take it again. And I begged her not to make him do that, first of all, because of the added prep.
Yes.
And second of all, because he could take it and score lower. You're not guaranteed of necessarily going up. And the mom was definitely, one of these more helicopter parent. And I thought she was actually doing a real disservice to her kid, who was very anxious to begin with.
Mm.
So it was sort of stepping in and saying, there's really not that much of a difference in the admissions process between 1580 and 1600. I think he's done. And, some people might say that's a silly business model. But I do think that if you ultimately show that you're on the kid's side and that you are caring for them and that your actions come from a place of caring, people remember that and they refer you to other people. And that's kind of what my business is predicated on.
Cool. It's just important, the communication and the communication skills there that have to take place. And there, a lot of parents are just, it needs to be perfect, or we want them to, into the best place possible. So,
Right.
And how can adults and parents really help their kids achieve their potential? Because it is a partnership in many ways. You are doing the tutoring, you're doing the help alongside. But the parents, they really do need to be a part of this. And I think that has become more and more obvious with some of the educational things that were revealed during our times of shutdown. A huge reveal of what was not happening in some of those classrooms and some of the teaching and all of that. So how can parents be a little bit more involved? What is the ideal as far as you see?
I think the ideal, I'll give you one general and one specific. In general, from the time a child is, I don't know, 6 months old and learning how to sit up, I think, parents can, if they can praise effort rather than results, I think that, and if they can kind of inculcate a growth mindset in students, which really is all about, the notion that our brains are not fixed capacities, but rather they can grow over time. I think that is the biggest gift a parent can give a student. And then specifically, I deal mostly with high school students. So I think recognizing where your child is at and trying to, what we call in the educational field, scaffold, by supporting them, but supporting them towards becoming more independent. So this is going to differ whether you have a 9th grade boy or a 12th grade girl, for example. A 12th grade girl is practically, independent. She doesn't need you to check in usually on whether she's scheduling her sessions, although some might. Whereas typically a 9th grade boy, you need to be much more involved in are they scheduling their sessions when they say they are? Are they doing their homework before they meet with me? And I think in the gamut between them, recognizing where your child is at and, frankly, not expecting that the tutor is going to wave their magic wand and that all of your child's shortcomings are going to disappear. That it's a process, I think that is where the student will get the most out of it, and the parent will also get the most for their money.
Wow.
It's been shocking to me. People will sign up for lessons with me and then don't check if their child has done their homework. And I just think, wow, we could be advancing much more if the parent had just say, hey, Johnny or Susie, did you do your homework?
Right. Wow. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We've raised, my husband and I, 3 sons. So we've come up with our own little challenges through this. Now, fortunately, they're launched, amazingly so. But it's making sure the homework is done. not only making sure it's done, but it's handed in. I mean, it's the simple little things that drive you crazy as a parent, just nuts. Okay. So what would you tell yourself, your younger self? There's a lot of those, you read this on social media. What would I say? How would I respond to my younger self? So, but when you were 17 or 21, what would you say to that stage of your life? And how does that really inform your teaching? Or does it influence your teaching at all? Can you recall some things from that time?
It totally informs my teaching. I would just generally say one word if I could, which is relax. I still am I'm a very hard worker, but I think back then I was much more an overachiever, and I really sort of rode myself very hard. And many people thought it was my parents, and the pressure didn't come from them. It was really internal. And that did, create a fair amount of anxiety during my late teens and early 20s. And, even after school, after I graduated from Harvard, the anxiety was, what should I be? What should my career be? And I do think if I could tell myself anything, it's to relax, because we have time. Most people will change careers, as I've done many times, and that's totally normal and okay. And, the other thing might just be trust yourself. I think I was very, skeptical that my own instincts had validity. And I think ultimately it's sort of like water, running through cracks. Ultimately, your own personality is going to shine through, right? And if you embrace that early on, the sooner you'll be to having, I think, a happy and productive life.
Now, does that kind of apply? I think many of those principles that you just talked about also does apply to entrepreneurship. But how was there maybe a little specific that could even apply more to now running a business and how you've launched out? Many entrepreneurs, I didn't realize really that I was an entrepreneur until lifetime entrepreneur. Actually, my whole life I've been an entrepreneur, but I didn't even know what that word was when I went to school. It wasn't really said a lot. So, but how has that also, when you say relax and, just kind of take things as they come, has that applied also to running a business?
It does, because I think, and one of the things that I think has made me successful for 10 years in running is the fact that I'm willing to experiment and try things that I have seen in women's entrepreneur groups that I've been a part of, that other women have often been reluctant to do. For example, during the pandemic, I joined an online networking group of female entrepreneurs. And we were paired up one-on-one, and we talked about our struggles and our strengths. And I encouraged my partner to try to do Facebook Live videos and post them to groups that might be interested in her business. And she said, I could never do that. And I said, what do you mean? It's free. It doesn't cost anything, and you're adding value. And she just was adamant that she would never do it. And I told her that in my time of doing this, and at that point it was only a couple years, I had gotten 2 clients that way and had already made thousands of dollars doing exactly that, because someone had seen me on Facebook. And it was just stepping out of her comfort zone that made her really uncomfortable. And I'll admit, I was uncomfortable doing it at first. I didn't like putting myself out there like that. But the more you do it, the more you feel comfortable with it. And I think then that extends to other types of things that, you think someone tells you, hey, you should try this. And you go, yeah, maybe I should try that. And what's the worst that can happen?
Yep. Oh, that's great. So, taking some of those risks
Right.
and yeah. And that's, the open door with, all of the media available for us and the live streaming and everything. I mean, none of this, again, when I was in college was even thought of. And we did a lot of stuff by hand. There were I mean, this sounds like I'm from the dark ages, but I did music copying too with my thesis all by hand because there were no computers to do that on. I mean, they were $20,000 a music typewriter was. There was who's going to, do that? Those are, I'm sure, long obsolete now too. So with the computers.
Right. Or my first tutoring advertisements were copies with like those little things I would cut at the bottom and put them up supermarket that people could tear off my phone number at the bottom. Yeah.
We all do it. Do it. We just use what's available. And so, and with all the technology, you just embrace it. You just think, well, they need to be tools. That's what, a good attitude toward them. Right. Well, I want to talk about a couple of things because this was intriguing about, what are some of the things happening on the ground in the world of adolescent education that most Americans or parents, they just have no idea about?
Well, during the pandemic, college admissions really changed. And I think, and even people who, like me, who are in the field, find the pace of change that has occurred since the pandemic overwhelming. And for parents who have a million different things to do, they don't know. For example, even though many colleges are test optional, meaning you don't have to submit an SAT or an ACT score, parents don't know, for example, that many scholarships are tied to just submitting an SAT or ACT score, and that students who do apply with SAT and ACT scores are sometimes admitted up to 3 times the rate of students who don't. And, oftentimes, for instance, my own second cousin's wife kind of was saying that she wasn't forcing her kids to take it and the SAT. And I said, I think that's a really unwise decision because I think you should at least prepare and take it and then strategically decide where you're going to use the score and where you're not going to use the score. And most parents really don't have any idea about that. They just, I think, often will follow the path of least resistance, and the kid doesn't want to take the SAT, and colleges are test optional, we won't take the SAT. And they'll just kind of, and then they'll realize they may need, and certain majors require the SAT to apply. And then students find out that it's too late by the time they're in 12th grade.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's, yeah. So just not taking just the easy road, but just to make sure you do all that you can for that process. So, right. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Whenever, the path of least resistance, don't we all go there sometimes? So,
Absolutely.
There's a mountain to climb. You're thinking, okay, is there an optional course? Can I go the long way around? Well, I want to talk about some tips that you would have because you've worked with multiple ages. So I want to talk first about the 3 biggest tips for those. Now, I have granddaughters, by the way. Nice. So I am listening very much. Some of those tips between K and 7th grade. And what are 3 of the biggest tips that you would give for those students at that stage and for the parents who are guiding those students?
So the biggest tips I have for the youngest fall into the categories of literacy, numeracy, and focus. So I'll take them one by one. One, if you can develop a child's love of reading early on, that will pay off in spades, when they get to something like the SAT or in college admissions. They don't even have to be the best reader. Like I have a niece, for example, who struggles with reading but likes it. a kid like that is going to be okay, right?
Yes.
Um, Same thing with numeracy. Make sure they're hitting their math benchmark, grade level benchmarks, because, I've worked with students who are 16 and can't multiply 8 times 8 without a calculator.
Mm.
And if you don't know, for example, your multiplication tables, well, fractions are very difficult. Then algebra becomes impossible. And so you can't accede to these higher levels of math without those strong foundations.
Mm.
Um, and then the last thing kind of will supplement both literacy and numeracy, and that's focus. These little things that we have, these phones, will destroy adults focus, but our brains were already formed before the internet, right? And so for students brains now who are still developing, it's really, I don't think it's a surprise that I just see the levels of ADHD have skyrocketed amongst my students in the past 5 years. So, I would say the longer you can keep them without a phone and the more you can keep them off screens, the better they'll be, the better their focus will be.
That's great. Really great input. Yeah, reading, big time with reading. We're a strong believer in that. In fact, we encouraged and helped out with a reading tutor for one of our granddaughters who was she was a little behind, and it really helped. It just immediately helped. And so that's, it's a good investment. That's an investment for the rest of her life. And so I think that's a really, really important. And the focus too. You can't always control as a grandparent what is going on, but you can set ground rules in your own house. So no phones. Yep.
Right.
So yeah, that's a good thing. So, well, now let's go to a little older, which could be some more challenges. What are the 3 biggest tips for those, the secondary? So that 8 through 12, and boy, times have changed a bit with that sort of those mid years. And so what advice would you give for those ages?
Well, the first piece of advice I'd give, if you hope that your child will attend college, is try just visiting college campuses nearby your house. And you don't even if you don't want your child to attend college in your state, just walking around a college campus and exposing your child in 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade to this is what college feels like, may give them that incentive to start working harder in school. And then we'll also give them a feeling of, hey, in my neck of the woods, I'm on Long Island, we have urban schools close by, we have suburban schools close by, we have, small, big, try going to a variety of schools, maybe once a month or once every other month, so that by the time your child's in 11th grade and they're building their college list, they will have a pretty clear idea of the type of school where they feel comfortable.
Oh,
So
great.
so that's my first tip. My second tip is, or I guess it's sort of more a newsflash, is that very few students get substantial money in sports scholarships. And what I see is tens of hours per week going into sports programs and traveling teams and, kids at games until 10 o'clock at night, and all in the parents' expectations that their kid is going to get a full ride. Mm-hmm. That only happens when your child is really like at the national level in their sport. So this is 2 and 3 kind of go together. So a much better investment of your child's time is their schoolwork. You will get much more bang for your buck in terms of time with getting a high GPA in college preparatory courses like AP or advanced placement courses than you will by being on a travel softball team.
Wow.
Um, and so I really think that there's often sort of a misplaced focus because parents aren't really well informed about where the money lies in the college admissions process. So those are kind of my three tips for parents.
Those are great tips. And it goes back to, and I married a professional athlete. So and he was, I mean, he got,
Right.
he didn't go the major, he got offers, but he ended up going to a state school, had great education that way. And, they won the college World Series. He just went to where the great team was. So, but, also I got that, great education, didn't have a lot of student debt, which was really important for us getting married. That was important. So, there's a lot of that going in. And we didn't have, growing up, I didn't have, I was more in music. We didn't have all of the other, traveling teams. And there was some intramurals, but it was different. Today, it is just so much emphasis on this. And I think parents are just exhausted. They're going to every game, and they've got multiple kids. That's, it's a big deal and a big investment. And very few are going to go into that professionally or be good enough to at least get those huge scholarships. So focusing on the academics, on, just to make sure that you've got that nurturing the sweet spot of education of where they're going to excel. I think that's really important. So, well, what other words of advice can you leave us with? This has been, I've really, really enjoyed this conversation because, it's kind of in that field that I love and that I think is so important for our youth. And for them to excel. And with all of the mental issues going on too, when a student starts excelling and started feeling better about themselves and started, with the mindset, that's only going to be good for our future generation. So
I agree. And I hope, well, I guess the one last thing I'd leave people with, and I hope I didn't come across as being anti-sports because I'm definitely not that. I'm a person I'm an open water swimmer. I'm a yoga teacher. So I love sports. I just think there maybe needs to be a little bit more balance between the sports for wellness and for socialization is amazing.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm totally for that. But a little bit more balance with the schoolwork is what I would advocate. And the other thing I would just say, I have a YouTube and I go into many of these topics way more in detail, and people can, for free, people can go to youtube.com/Crimson Coaching and find, they're generally about half-hour long webinars on many of these topics.
That's great. I will put that all in the notes, of course, in the show notes. And so they'll be able, how else can people contact you? They can contact you probably through your website and through YouTube. How can they get a hold of you? Yeah.
If you'd like to just kind of see more about what I'm up to, I do give a variety of either online webinars and in-person classes here on Long Island. You can go to my website, crimsoncoaching.com. I have a bunch of free resources there for parents and students, as well as on my resources page, I have a recorded MP3 guided meditation. If you have test anxiety, it'll kind of ratchet down your test anxiety, hopefully, by listening to it. And then, of course, to get in touch with me, you can either go to the contact page at crimsoncoaching.com or just email me directly at info@crimsoncoaching.com.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. So I've just enjoyed this so much. And again, I will remind everyone, all of those links will be in the show notes. Many times I put out an article as well. Make sure you're getting our newsletter. Comes really twice a week, because the articles come out once a week, and our podcasts, I announce podcasts, and I've been doing some bonuses too, some wonderful bonus interviews. So they're great. So goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. And we don't spam you. We don't share emails, but this is just to be able to get onto that list. You can unsubscribe anytime, but I think you're going to want to click in on a lot of those articles, because you're just such valuable input. Like today, it's just huge for parents, grandparents. That's hugely valuable. Some of those tips, and all of those will be, of course, you can listen to them. And if the article comes out, with it, I usually put in all of those tips and notes as well, so you can grab those. So, and well, thank you so much for being with us. It's just a wonderful conversation, and thank you all who are listening to hang on to the very end. Thank you very much. And this is so much fun. It comes out at least once a week, and so make sure you follow our and subscribe to our podcast. And get all of our other things as well. We have a lot of things offered as well. So thanks again for being with us. And I will look forward to being with everyone again next time. So bye-bye for now. Thank you for joining us. It is because of our wonderful listeners like you that we keep going strong week after week. We'd love it if you'd share and follow us to not miss a single show, and even write a review. You can also find all of our articles, products, and links at womenathalftime.com.